back into our solution. So from the previous exercise, so you're just going to actually like speed up, because if you didn't solve anyway, it's actually a good practice. So let's just follow. So I'm going to say, so my driver, let's just say our driver. So our driver, let's just assign it to, we had assigned it to Omondi. So his carrying capacity, so let's say carrying, then we assigned it was 35. So, and then the next thing was a boolean, so which was checking if it was drunk. So if it's drunk, and then we had agreed to set it to false. Now, what I was actually trying to check from you is, we talked about it not being actually concatenating a string and an integer and a string. So I did this false boolean to make sure that you can actually figure out on how that could work. So because you cannot concatenate directly a boolean and an integer, or an integer and a boolean, or a boolean with a string, then you add to actually simply convert it, just the way we talked about converting strings into just strings. So, well, I'm just going to print that. So I'm going to say print driver. So let's just keep it short, driver plus our driver, then carrying, then we're just going to add the carrying capacity. Then you're also going to actually like add this drunk status. So let's just call it status, so that it can actually be short. Status, then we can add is drunk. So by default, this is going to throw an error, because we are concatenating a string and also trying to concatenate an integer together with a boolean. So to solve this, what I was trying to make sure that you have to do the research is that we can actually do casting. So we can just directly not cast casting, so by using the string method. So you also make sure that you have casted. I'm not sure if there's English like casted, but to make sure that you have actually like casted the same thing. So once you now run this, go, we now have the driver Omondi carrying 35, status false. So it's actually like almost overlapping, because we didn't actually add a space. So let's say how we just add space over starting here and from. So well, once we run this, we now see that our driver Omondi carrying 35 passengers, status drinking status is false. So that was all you could do for that project. So the next thing we want to do now is we want to make sure that we just get input from the user. So I'm just going to clear this. Now we're done with the solution. So the next thing is we want to see updating and escaping characters, and then we want to check the input of our user. So let's say we want now to maybe like print open multiple times. So maybe like print like Python. So that's a string. So remember, it has to have the opening and closing. Then so we have to use the asterisk. So maybe like we want to print Python 5 times. So instead of maybe like having you type print Python 5 times, you can use the asterisk to actually make sure that you can print Python very easily without using the print methods. So you can now see that everything is on the same line. So to help us actually like print this in next line, so our Python allows us to actually add the next print line. not Python, this is Java, sorry. So that's why we want to now study about escaping characters. So I'm just going to clear that. So just when you want to print them into the next line, so I want you to add a backslash and then n. So once you have that, that means it tells the Python interpreter that, hey Python, I want now to actually print this in the next line. So when you run that, you now see it's Python. So the same backslash n next line can be used to maybe like, you can say print them in tabs. So if you now had t and then we run this one, you see now that Python automatically adds tabs in between them. So we can actually have other characters. There are so many, but these are some of the basic. Then we could also maybe like, so just remove this. So Python. So let's say you want to recommend somebody to a book. So maybe like now, like say it's a Python's developer conference. Now this will actually work pretty cool. It's very well. But remember, again, we can use strings, single quotes to actually declare strings. But if you run this, let's see what could actually bring about. Syntax error, because this one is actually taken as a different part. So we have a string inside here and other words which Python does not recognize because we have not declared them. So to make sure that we are escaping this character, then we can now use \n. So not \n, but the backslash. So when we now run that, we now see that it has actually Python has assumed, or it has made sure that it's not going to print an error because you have just told the interpreter that, hey, Python, we want to include this character over here. So this some of the things about escaping characters. So even if we now add a double quotes here, and then also add a double quotes, and then also let's say we add a double quotes without adding that, so it's going to throw the same error. So make sure that you always use the backslash if you want to include special characters in Python. So I'm just going to clear my output. Now the next thing I want us to do is actually let's see, check first escaping. We're done with this one. So the next thing is updating. So let's say we want to update a variable, so I'm going to remove that. So let's say the carrying capacity of our matatu, now the vehicle, was 45. Now let's say due to some restriction of movement, so the carrying capacity was reduced to 20. So we can do that by easily reassigning it to actually the same variable. So this creates a different variable apart from this one. So if you now print carrying capacity, so print carrying capacity. Now if you run this, we're going to get 20. So this is actually some part of actually updating variables. So you can use the same name, an integer, and then store it in a variable, maybe a different one, or if you don't want, that's if you don't want to tamper your data from the previous variable assigned. So that's actually updating. So the next thing we want to do, we update about this, is now the user input. So back into our Matatu project, is it really a project, a quiz, the Matatu quiz, we want to get a user input. So let me clear that, and also let me clear this because you are done with that. So let's say we want to get a user input to enter. Maybe we are designing a Matatu or this vehicle. We want to enter maybe the certain number of passengers and maybe the model of the car. So to do that, Python provides us with a very awesome method actually called input. So with input, it will now allow you to get user input entered from the keyboard. So to do that, you're going to use input and then tell the user what you want to actually get. So maybe like capacity. So you want to ask the user, hey, can you enter a capacity of your vehicle? So we can now put the entire thing, or the entire actually code, into a variable name. So let's assign a variable name to this. So maybe like the Matatu vehicle. So this Matatu vehicle is getting a user input, and then the input is being stored to this variable. So when we now actually print this, so if you say now print the Matatu vehicle, so we are going to get an input from the user. So if you're using VS Code, so that we can have the user input, we are going to go directly into run instead of Control-Alt-N. So go run, then run without debugging. So actually, I'm sorry, this is a little bit small. So once done actually doing that, so you can see now that we have this capacity. So maybe let's say 65, 56. So we now find that the capacity is 56. So we can just tell maybe the user that, print out to the user something like the carrying capacity. Then add that. Then make sure you close it. Then we concatenate it. Remember, we are actually taking an integer, so we are going to convert it into a string so that Python doesn't complain. So once we have that, I'm just going to delete this output, and then we're going to actually go back and run, and actually run without debugging. So Once it's done, then we can now maybe like add a capacity of 50. So that shows us that the carrying capacity is now at 50. So that was really very cool. Now, the next project I want you to do is I want you to define, so that I define a project, not a project. I want you to actually complete this. So I want you to get a user input. So make sure you get the name, then also the age of the person. So let the user enter his name, like my name is Owen and my age is 40. So let's actually meet in the next class or a lesson or a lecture or whatever you call it. So I'll see you there. Make sure you complete the project before moving to the next step.